This is a presentation of SBE 15, New York City.
I have some interesting stuff to tell you about what I've been learning about radio and cars. We have a test bed too in our new building. It's called the Pilot Radio Test Bed. Pilot is like we call it our innovation initiative. It's like a separate brand. We have companies like Google and Facebook and I lose track who's currently a member. Xperia is a member. These are companies, many of them in the digital space, where we try to work with them and collaborate with, get them to collaborate with broadcasters and make the integration of digital services and broadcasting services a little smoother. And I manage Pilot technology products, although our budgets have been pretty lean the last couple of years since we missed 2 trade shows, and I haven't had as many projects as I used to. This is our department. Maybe you know some of these folks. Sam Matheny, he's our CTO. He comes out of North Carolina. Used to work for Capital Broadcasting, and then maybe you know Kelly and Lynn. Been around for a long time, longer than me, in fact. And we collaborate with Allison and Bob Weller in legal, who actually kind of share their time between the legal department and the tech department. And Bob, of course, Bob is a registered professional engineer, so he's the only PE we have on staff. And everyone's great. I encourage you to reach out to us if you have questions about what we do or just broadcasting questions in general. So we moved to a new building in it was right before the pandemic when we were supposed to move, and then things got a little shifted. But we're in there now, and we're supposed to be there 3 days a week. Our each staff members are. I just wanted to take you through the building real quick here because it's a wonderful facility, and if you're ever down our way, I hope you come by and see it. Conrad, did you? We had that face-to-face meeting of the tech committee. Were you there in person?
Yeah, I didn't make it down, David. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I'm glad I have these pictures to show you.
Yep.
This is in our lobby. We have a big video screen in the lobby. It's actually kind of curved. It's cool because the panels, it's an LG display, and the panels are actually on like flexible backing. So they're like rubber, so you can bend them. And it's got kind of a curved surface. And it's very visible from the street. And we have some content that we actually produce, which talks about NAB. We have a conference center on the top floor. This is actually a picture from that technology committee meeting we held there on October. This conference center is big enough for us to have board meetings at, which is nice because we have board meetings a couple times a year, and it helps us save a little money when we can hold them in our building and we don't have to go to some fancy hotel. Up front here in the room, that's another LG, LED display, which was really nice. All of our conference rooms are set up for Zoom meetings, and I'm sitting in a conference room near my office. A lot of the rooms have these comfy chairs, and they look more like a lounge or a living room. But you might notice here, I'm actually on a Zoom meeting in the room with myself, so I could illustrate, how well the room is set up for teleconferencing. And it's a good thing because, everybody wants to work from home these days. We have a technology lab in our new building, which we did not have before. And in this picture, you see a bunch of next-gen TV displays where we do viewing tests and other things and test out apps for next-gen TV in here. We work with Sinclair and the TV manufacturers, Sony, Samsung, LG, and now we have a Hisense in the lab because those are the 4 manufacturers that are selling next-gen TVs right now. This is looking in the other direction. Up here in the corner, this is the Pilot Radio test bed, these 3 racks. This was built back in 2014. It was only 2 racks back then by Cavell Mertz and Associates, and I'll have a little more to say about that later. And this is me showing the test bed to a bunch of kids because we had take your kids to work day, and they decided it'd be fun to take them through the lab. And without a doubt, this was the toughest audience I ever had. God knows why I thought I could point to the display and, teach them something, but it was interesting. Here I'm on the roof. Well, I'm actually not on the roof. I think Bob Weller took this picture. We have an antenna, a UHF and VHF antenna here. And I mainly wanted to show you this, to show you, if you look up here towards the top, you can see the dome of the US Capitol. So this gives you an idea of how close our new building is to the Capitol. And that was the idea, is since we mainly exist to talk to government people, we wanted to be closer to where they were, and we're a lot closer, and we see a lot more of them now in our new building than we used to. Last picture is a picture of our TV studio. We have this really cool video wall right here, and then we also have these video panels back here, and there was a NAB town hall today, which was shot in this studio, and I believe that we make this studio available for hire as well, because it's such a nice studio. So there's our new building. Again, I hope if you're in town, look me up and I'd be happy to take you through it. So now I'm going to start talking about some technical stuff, and I'll apologize to the folks on the call who only care about TV, because I'm the radio guy. So I'm going to be talking about radio stuff for the most part. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is related to FM HD radio. And we have been working with our members to try and get the FCC to change the rules so that more broadcasters can increase their power to minus 10 dBc, which is the maximum power that's currently allowed under the rules. And if you talk to Xperi, they will tell you that that's the maximum power that's ever been contemplated for this service. So currently broadcasters, there's a minus 14 dBc blanket authorization for FM HD radio. So any station except for grandfathered superpower stations can go to minus 14. And there's a formula which tells you whether you're eligible to go to minus 10 or not. And that formula is based upon your proximity to first adjacent channel stations. And what we have done is we have come up with a relaxed formula based on engineering studies and field testing. And we are proposing that to the FCC, and they put it on public notice last November. Comments on this public notice were due, I guess, a week ago today, and replies are still being accepted until mid-February. So we're very encouraged by that. Let me just talk a little bit about it. It was actually back in 2010 when the FCC allowed broadcasters to increase power on these FM HD radio stations. Originally, they were only allowed to use minus 20 dBc, which is not sufficient to replicate coverage. So minus 14 is a big improvement. Minus 10 is even better. Right now, it's difficult to get to minus 10 because of the rules that were adopted in 2010, and that's what we're trying to change here. And the issue, of course, is if you increase your power, are you going to be interfering with those first adjacent channel neighbors? So it turns out that the parameters of interest are for the iBox station, the F5010 interfering contour, and where it hits the protected contour of that first adjacent channel station. Now, because of the fact that many stations are at higher power than the class maximum that you would normally think that would limit their power, we have shown in our filing many examples which exist today where stations are operating at much higher power levels than the current rule allows for. And this chart here illustrates that. Under the current rule, the F5010 value at the first adjacent channel's protected contour is 51.4 dBu. We have stations that are operating 20 dB higher than that without objectionable interference, without any complaints at least. And then our proposal is actually quite conservative. these stations that I have in this table here, none of them would actually be eligible for a power increase because these are extreme cases. And this is kind of an example of how our proposal is really fairly conservative. So we did some tests up in your neck of the woods. These were the stations that we used. We had in both, we had two situations of an iBox station interfering with a first adjacent channel. The desired first adjacent that was being interfered with in both cases was WNYC. And we had WZMX up in Connecticut on one side for one test, and WIP down in Philadelphia on the other side for another test. And the plan was for these pairs of stations, we made audio recordings at -14 dBc, which is currently allowed, and then at -10 dBc, which is what would be allowed under our proposed rule change. We made those audio recordings and we compared them. We listened to them. We did subjective evaluations to see if we could tell a difference between what it sounded like when there was a -14 dBc interferer and when there was a -10 dBc interferer. So here's a map showing the locations of the WNYC. That's the station we were listening to in each case. These X's here mark where we actually did some recordings. And then here you can see the iBox stations, which were first adjacent to WNYC, and we wanted to see if the interference changed when we went from -14 to -10. Here are some more maps. These blue lines here are the test routes that we drove, and you can see that they are actually, well, in both cases, you'll see in this first case, it's just inside the protected contour of WNYC. So this is the extent of their protected coverage that we were looking at. And then similarly, now you flip it. Now we're on the other side of the WNYC coverage area, and we have a test route, which is just inside the protected contour. And what we did was our test vehicle, we had 4 receivers, so we were recording the audio on 4 receivers simultaneously and for two cases. First with the -14 dBc interferer, second with the -10 dBc interferer. And we collected a lot of audio. We collected over 14 hours of audio. And I'm not going to go into the details here, but we came up with a way to winnow that down into a couple of recordings that were maybe 1.5 minutes in length. They were in a spot where we were able to establish that it was a good place to listen because it was the place where, how can I say this? We actually, I guess I'll say a little bit about what we did. We used a tool that Xperi has, which tells you whether or not a receiver would want to switch to a streaming audio version if the over-the-air signal got too bad, and that's useful for their hybrid radio system. And so using that, we were able to find spots where the over-the-air audio performance was on the threshold of being at the point where you'd want to switch to the streaming audio. And it was a good method to use. Everybody thought it worked pretty well. So we listened to these excerpts of the recorded audio, and we rated them, whether they were, on this 5-point scale. And there were 3 possible outcomes when we did this. The -10 sounded worse than the -14. That's what you would expect because it's a stronger interferer. The second possibility is that they sounded the same. And the third was the -14 sounded worse than the -10. And that's just an anomalous case, you might think. But what this really speaks to is that at the edge of coverage, the signal quality isn't all that good to begin with. So what we discovered was whether the interferer was -14 or -10, it really didn't matter. When we compiled the results, what we demonstrated was that there was really no significant difference depending upon whether it was a minus 14 dBc or a minus 10 dBc interferer. And this is one of the things that we have submitted to the FCC to demonstrate that our proposal to change the rules would be a good one, and it wouldn't result in a lot of excessive or additional interference. So I mentioned at the start that the comment period for this proceeding ended last week. 15 comments were filed, overwhelmingly supportive. There's actually two things being considered here. One is this ability for stations to increase power. The other one is for stations to use asymmetric sidebands. And that's useful in a case where a digital radio station has one station is closer on one side of the frequency band than it is on the other, and you can adjust the sideband power so that it's a little higher on one side, because on that side the first adjacent station's farther away, but then on the other side you can lower it a little bit, and it allows the station to maximize their coverage. And this is actually we made this request back in 2019.
David, we have a question.
Okay, sure. Let me stop talking then. And
okay. Well, I didn't want you to go past this because it's involved.
Sure. Okay. Hi, David. So we used the programming was mostly the WNYC program, I believe, was talk, because they're, WNYP, New York Public Radio, is a talk station primarily, and that was actually desired because you're more likely to recognize the interference when you're listening to a talk station. So the interfering stations, I'm going to go back again, and I believe you all might know better than I do. I believe that WZMX is classical. Does that sound right? And WIP, well, it really doesn't matter what the programming on the iBox stations is, because it's the digital sidebands which are creating the interference. And those digital sidebands look the same no matter whether there's no programming or music or talk, or doesn't matter. So the only thing that really mattered here was the WNYC programming. And as I said, I believe in every case it was both male speech and female speech, which is what you would want. So thanks for the question, David. I was talking about the asymmetric sideband petition we filed in 2019, and nobody commented. And we went to the FCC, and they were like, well, we're not going to act on this because nobody's interested in it. Nobody cares. So we've really been working hard to get broadcasters in particular to weigh in on this current proceeding. And I'd just like to point out to the group listening tonight, you have an opportunity to weigh in and support this, and that would be meaningful. And it's easy to do. And I'm going to send out this PDF of the presentation, so you'll be able to click on this link in that PDF. Go to the FCC's website, and it looks like this, and you select the proceeding of interest, which is this one, and it's pretty simple to file comments. You can just type in comments if you want, or you can do something a little fancier and submit a PDF. But your support would be helpful if this is something that you can weigh in on, and you do support it. Then I would encourage you to go ahead and fill a reply. Read some of the comments. I mean, they're pretty interesting. And one of the most interesting comments, this is kind of an aside, somebody pointed out that there's a phenomenon, they called it HD hijacking. And I don't know if anyone on this call is familiar with it, but here's what happens. If you have two co-channel stations that are adjacent and close by geographically, one of them is analog and the other one is broadcasting digital, someone can be in the analog station's listening area. And if they have a really good iBox receiver, with good sensitivity, it will actually receive the digital signal from the neighboring station and lock onto it. So it will, in that case, it would blend from the analog station whose market they're in to the digital station that's farther away. So it's a pretty rare occurrence, but it does happen. I've heard about it before. And the point in mentioning it in this filing is that if we're increasing the power of the digital here in an area where this HD hijack phenomenon exists, it might become a little more prevalent. So
we've got another question for you.
okay, looks like okay, let me answer that. When I say high power FM, I'm really talking about the power in the digital sidebands of an FM HD radio signal. So, and regular FM, I guess, would be using the digital sidebands under the current rules, which by and large restrict most broadcasters to minus 14 dBc, which means that the digital sideband power is 14 dB below the power of the analog signal of that FM station. So it's a little bit of a shortcut. When I say high power FM, I'm really referring to the power just in the digital sidebands. Those are changing. And what many broadcasters would like to do is increase the level of those digital sidebands from minus 14 to minus 10 so that they can improve their coverage. So I hope that answers your question. I guess I'll just keep this chat window open and then I can see questions as they come in.
I can let you know if you want to just focus.
Okay. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about this topic. Another anecdote would be that the week that the pandemic shut the world down was the week we were scheduled to do our field test for this what I just described to you. In fact, we had a third station lined up as well. And I don't know if you all remember this, but the first jurisdiction in the country which shut down was New Rochelle. And it was right near where our tests were going to be conducted. And we canceled them at the last minute. And it was over 2 years before we were able to restart them. So it was a little bit of a star-crossed project in that sense.
4 questions coming in for you.
Okay. I'm looking I don't see them yet.
Okay, well, I'll read them to you.
Here we go. I can see it now. So
okay.
Mike is asking about why would there have been instances where the test showed that minus 14 sound caused worse than the minus 10, and that was what we were showing right here, this one case here. I think that it's almost, I don't want to say a measurement error, but this is illustrative of how the signal is already pretty lousy. I mean, if it's fair, it's just because they don't sound that much different. And it's probably due as much to the listeners that were judging them as anything else. And there's a test that you can do to try and establish the statistical significance on differences in a test like this. And when we apply that test to this data, what we find is that none of these differences are statistically significant. So it's just an indication of how close they sounded, really. I mean, and we saw in 3 cases, they sounded exactly the same. And when you look at the places where they sounded different, they were just barely different. So I hope that helps answer the question. And I'll stop here another second or two to see if there's any other questions. I'll say that we're hopeful that the FCC will act on this year. And they move pretty slowly. The next step will be a notice of proposed rulemaking. We hope. They look at these comments and say, yeah, this would be good. People want to do it. So let's go ahead and make a proposal to change the rules. And then there'll be another reply comment period. And then at that point, the rule could actually change. And that could feasibly be done this year. And that's our hope. Well, I'm going to go ahead and shift gears here now. Haha, no pun intended. Talk about some auto initiative stuff. The first topic involves DTS Auto Stage, which is a new hybrid radio technology that Xperi has developed, and we're now seeing roll out in vehicles. And what hybrid radio is, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, is radio system that combines over-the-air and internet content so that you can be listening to the audio that's being delivered over the air, but you can be looking at metadata, images and text, for example, that were delivered to the receiver over the internet. And hybrid radio it's a pretty exciting technology. One of the most exciting parts is that because the receiver is connected to the internet, it's possible to actually learn about listener behavior. So you can, and then Xperi, I don't have any slides about that in this presentation, but Xperi will be providing broadcasters with listening information about their stations if they are participating in AutoStage, which means they sign an agreement with Xperi and they agree to provide the metadata directly to them. So you can see where your listeners are, when your listeners are listening, that sort of thing. And this is actual measured, big data, so to speak. It's not just a survey like you get from Nielsen. So Mercedes was the first company to come out with this technology in their S-Class vehicles, which are pretty expensive. I dare say there aren't a whole lot of those on the road. But last fall, there was a really exciting development. Hyundai released a navigation update to existing vehicles, which in some cases actually implements the AutoStage hybrid radio. And I just happen to own one of those vehicles. It's a 2022 Hyundai Ioniq 5, which is a electric car. I'll show you some slides in a minute. But so they did this release also for Kia and Genesis vehicles, because of course Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis are all the same company. And Tesla also updated their receivers in their existing vehicles to have hybrid radio features. So I wrote about this in a blog, which again, when you get the PDF, you'll just be able to click on this and go to it. And we have installed this in a number of vehicles. And what I'm going to do is show you what this has done to the listener experience in those vehicles.
Got a question from Bud.
Okay, here, let me. Well, so far, the only manufacturers who have implemented AutoStage are Mercedes, the Hyundai Group, and Tesla. Now, Xperi says that this year, 3 more manufacturers are going to start selling vehicles with the AutoStage technology. But as far as more aggressive towards AutoStage, I'm going to say the Hyundai Group is, because Hyundai is more of a mass market car company. When they put AutoStage in S-Class Mercedes, which I think start around $100,000, that's not front page news in my view, as much as putting it in Hyundais and Kias, which there's a ton of. So in that sense, I would say that Hyundai is aggressively deploying this technology. I think I saw another question here too. So this is a question about improving EAS. And with polygon data to be able for receivers. So the short answer to that question is I would say that's not something that's being actively pursued right now. HD radio receivers have something called HD radio emergency alerts, which give broadcasters an opportunity to provide enhanced alerting information to vehicles. But I don't believe they're really making use of polygon data to geofence, for example. But let me continue on though with my conversation about the AutoStage. This is an excerpt from the list that Hyundai published for the vehicles that can have this update. What you'll notice is there are different types of navigation systems listed here. And based upon what we've seen, it's only the Gen 5W navigation systems which actually experience the AutoStage update and with the hybrid radio functionality. And I'll show you some examples of that. I have actually installed this in these 3 vehicles with 3 different infotainment systems. And again, the Gen 5W is the one that is showing auto stage metadata. So let's look at some examples of the 3 cars that I updated. Here's the 2015 Sonata. What you see here is before update and after update look the same. So it's clear that these vehicles are not getting the hybrid radio functionality. But here, as long as we were doing this, we thought it was a good opportunity to look at the differences in the I'll say 3 levels of metadata that this receiver does support. This one up here, you'll notice HD radio and info are not selected. And there's really very little information. When you select info on this one on the bottom, what that does is that activates the RDS metadata. And you see you have this is what you actually call this radio text. But it's just a line of text. It's kind of a dumb line of text. And it just is what it is. But when you implement the HD radio feature here, now you have text that's sorted out by station information. This wasn't a good example, because if this were a music station, I think we would have seen song title and artist information here that's delineated by these icons. So just an example of an older receiver that's making use of metadata. The second car was the 2020 Hyundai Santa Fe. In this case, we do see a difference before and after the update, but we don't see the hybrid radio, the metadata coming in over the internet. But if you look closely, what you'll notice is after the update, we're now seeing a station logo. And that station logo is being delivered to the receiver over artist experience function of HD radio. So this update did have an impact on these, that I think this was the Gen 5 receiver, in that it improves the HD radio experience in the vehicle. And here's another example comparing the RDS metadata. Here I have the HD radio, it's turned off. And then the metadata with the HD radio turned on. And you can see again, it's improved. There's a station logo. If the station had been sending an album art could have shown up here. And I see there's a question. So these updates are in the car, not at the station. Correct. These are updates to the receivers. Now, last but not least, and most exciting one, too, is the Ioniq 5. And on the top here, you see the before the update receiver interface, which was kind of quirky, I guess I'll call it. It had these, faux Nixie tube type number display. Look at it's receiving a HD radio logo information, but it's just this tiny little image. It seemed kind of odd. When I got the car and looked at it, I'm like, why is that? Why do they have all this screen area and they put a tiny little image in it? It didn't make sense to me. And here you see the presets, and those are just the station, frequency. After the update, we see a much nicer user interface. We see a properly sized, I'll say, image. And the most exciting thing is over here on the left, we now have presets which have logos for each station and which have information. There's the gamut, LZOL, WAMU. This is station information that has been delivered to the receiver over the internet. So much improved. Here's another example. This is just for FM, same thing really. Before it was a tiny little logo, goofy number display. Afterwards, we have a really rich station list with logos, station information. We have a nice size image, and we have the song title and artist text metadata. The really coolest screen I can show you though are these station lists. When you hit station list now on these cars, you get a really informative station list. Every station has a logo. Every station has information that they have provided to Xperi. And for AM too, look at this AM this is just a remarkable AM station list. It looks just like FM or what you might see for Sirius XM, for example. And the challenge is getting people to listen to AM, I think. But this is, this could be a sea change for AM. This kind of really promotes AM to a modern audio service in the vehicle. Now I'm going to stop here. I see a question. Does the HD radio update mitigate the issues with auto manufacturers that are dropping AM reception from their radios? So the manufacturers that are dropping AM are primarily the electric car companies, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, have taken AM out of their electric vehicles, but AM is still in their ICE, internal combustion engine vehicles. Hyundai still has AM in their electric vehicle, and it works fine. And I have a slide here in a minute that's going to show you I did a survey at the LA Auto Show of electric cars with AM radios, and you'll see that most of them still have AM. So it's kind of a separate issue, I guess. So lastly here, one of the things that I suspect most of us on this call have made use of Android Auto or CarPlay, which is what are called projection technologies, where you take content from your phone and you display it on the car dashboard. Before this auto stage update, on the top here, you see what my car's display looked like when I had Android Auto going and I was listening to the radio. And it was, it's a generic radio icon and a frequency. But now, when I do the same thing, I get very rich data. I have an album. This looks like an artist image, great metadata. And I also, the next station and the before and after presets are showing up here. And again, we've got a lot more information than we had before. So all in all, it's a really great update. And I really feel like what a coincidence that I would buy this car and it would have this update that I can enjoy. And it's really made my radio listening a lot more enjoyable. So lastly, I'm showing you here now the Tesla update. This is Conrad. This is actually a photo out of my coworker's Model Y. And Conrad had experienced this update as well in his Tesla. It looks the same. What the Tesla update, for one thing, the Tesla only has FM, not AM. And what the Tesla update has done is make this, again, it's improved the station list that's available for people to look at. And you see all the logos. You don't see as much station information as we did in the Hyundai. But Conrad, I'll ask you to chime in on what do you think, because you've got the Tesla and you've been experiencing it.
Yeah, there's no doubt that this is a much better interface than what was in there before the auto stage update. And I think that a key point here, if you look closely at the screen, the upper left-hand corner, where it's 103.5 HD2, what it's doing is it's making translators and HD2 and HD3 channels the equivalent of a main channel. In other words, there's no difference as you're looking at these directories. It's just another channel. It's not a sub channel of a main station or anything like that. It's just you can select the station and logo and listen to it. So it's leveling the playing field for all of those stations and making them all more easily accessible to the users rather than have to, wait for, the HD to kick in and then show the sub channels and try to find them. This just, puts it all out there. So I think it's definitely an improvement over, what was there before.
I'll also comment too. I think that having the logos is almost like, I feel like it's a safety issue too, because I find that glancing at my radio screen, I recognize that logo much quicker than than reading whatever the information is on the station. So I find that it's, it's just a little more intuitive. I see a question here. Can the internet radio programming come from the phone that is connected with Android? Yeah. I mean, if I go back here, when I'm using Android Auto, I get my podcasts um, through the phone. I don't know if I have. I don't know if I have. I think I could have an iHeart Radio app here, so I'd be getting internet radio that way. But there's no built-in internet radio feature in the Hyundai. I believe there is in the Tesla, though, right, Conrad?
They just added, so they've had TuneIn, they've had they had Tidal, and now they just added Apple. So if you're an Apple Music subscriber, you can just bring that up. The app is already there, and you just log in. And their login, the process to activate it is so simple. You just aim at a QR code on the screen, and it immediately activates it on the car. So it's so I have my choice of listening to the regular radio stations or any of those options. And for me, I listen to a lot of out of market stations, and TuneIn app just allows me to bring up any of the Cumulus stations that are on there.
Right. But in that case, that internet radio service is coming through the car. It's not coming through your phone, I do believe, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, if you have an internet feed on your phone that you want to listen to, you just activate the Bluetooth.
Yeah. Right. And I can do that in my Hyundai. So that is my AutoStage implementation update. If you have a Hyundai, Kia, or Genesis vehicle, I didn't mention it, perhaps I didn't emphasize it earlier, but these Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis updates you have to do them with some media. In my case, we were using either SD cards or flash drives. It's too big to send over the air, and I don't know if Hyundai has any plans for doing over the air updates. I think you just got in your car one day, right, Conrad, and it was updated.
Yes, the Tesla sends updates periodically, and it lets you know when they're coming, and then it makes you select yes, it's okay to do the updates, so that, you can do it when the car's not in use. And one day it was one version, and the next day the version that had the update in it applied, and the screens changed. But that happens all the time on the Tesla. They just updated it again, and I couldn't find my garage door opener. It's just like they keep moving stuff around on the UI, and it's a little frustrating. But clearly, the AutoStage was an update that was an improvement.
Yeah. So again, in my PDF, these will be clickable, and if you have a Kia, Hyundai, or Genesis, I would encourage you to update it, and you may be pleasantly surprised. So the last auto topic, and it looks like it'll probably be my last topic today, will be my report from the 2022 LA Auto Show, which was last November. My main purpose in going was to look at electric cars and see what the infotainment systems were like, and in particular, whether they had AM or not. I had last been to the LA Auto Show in 2019. And it was quite a change. When I went in 2019, there were 9 electric vehicles on the show floor. This year, there were 35. And I was able to get in 25 of them and operate the radios and figure out whether they had AM or not. And I'll report on that here in these next couple slides. I have to mention, though, that there were quite a few automakers not exhibiting, most notably Mercedes, Audi, and BMW. And I mention that because they have electric cars, and their electric cars don't have AM. So if they had been there, my statistics would have worked out a little bit differently. So these statistics, I feel like, are optimistic. This is just the layout of the show. It's a really cool show. I love going to auto shows. It's a really tough assignment. So it's a big event. What I do is this is my spreadsheet. I looked at 25 electric cars, and then I had time to look at 11 internal combustion engine cars, and I create a spreadsheet. And this year I was looking for these things, whether it had AM, whether it had a volume knob, HD radio, a radio button, a tune knob, and whether it had the Android Automotive operating system, which is different from Android Auto. Android Auto is a phone projection technology, but Android Automotive is a operating system for the car. So these are some pictures of what I saw. These are the electric vehicle radio displays. Here's the Hyundai that we were just looking at. They rolled out a new Ioniq model called the Ioniq 6, and it looks exactly like this radio does. Ford has this kind of cool integrated knob on the flat panel display itself. And my understanding is that they like stick it on the display, and the display somehow senses the movement of the knob. VW has this touch slide control for volume, which I don't. I put an aftermarket radio on one of my cars, which has touch volume, and I hate it. I really wish it had a knob. I saw some hybrid radio features in Lexus and Toyota cars. Here's a Lexus which has AM station logos. The only way you can do that is if it's got hybrid radio with the internet connectivity. And this Toyota, this is a just about ready for production Toyota electric car, had this switch which says enable hybrid radio. So this was kind of a mystery. I don't know if it's AutoStage or not. Nobody has announced what this technology is, but I just made note of it. There were 3 cars with Android Automotive that I looked at, and it turns out that the Android Automotive operating system has a very paltry feature set for radio. And that's a whole nother talk. NAB has been involved with Xperi and broadcasters from around the world, really, to get Google to improve the radio feature set for Android Automotive. And it's too early to say that we've been successful, but we're optimistic that they're going to make use of the software that we developed, which would provide full functionality. And you can see how lousy these interfaces are for the radio. I mean, there's nothing there. There's no metadata. I don't even believe this one has, this Indy one, at least they have HD. Some of them didn't even have HD. So that's an issue that we're following at NAB. So I mentioned I looked at 11 regular cars, and they all had AM radio. So they all had volume knobs. One thing that I did notice is that the Chevy Suburban does not, as a brand new Chevy Suburban, it did not have HD radio in it. And that was disappointing because I'll show you here. I think I have some of the displays. It's got a really nice interface, and look at, the internet radio that's probably coming through a projection system, or maybe not. Maybe that's even built in. Looks great. So since it doesn't have HD radio, it makes the radio look a lot, the comparison is quite dramatic. And that's discouraging. I also saw here with this Chrysler Grand Wagoneer, a passenger display. This is the first car I saw other than the Porsche Taycan, which is a super expensive electric car, with a passenger display. So you're starting to actually see that now in production vehicles. So here's the takeaways. I know I'm nearly out of time. 19 models out of 25 had AM in the electric cars. So 76%, it's a little optimistic. I think if the German manufacturers had been there, it would have been lower. So that's good. I mean, AM is not, you talk to some people and they just assume AM is in electric vehicles because of what they hear about Audi and BMW, but that's just not the case. Here's just a graph. It's actually, by percentage, it's similar to what I saw in 2019. So it would have been less if the other vehicles had, the other manufacturers had been there. But so it's definitely something that we want to follow. You may have heard about the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is Ford's electric F-150. They announced that they were taking AM out of the 2023 F-150 Lightning. So we're trying to engage Ford and explain to them that AM is important, that markets have AM stations are like in the top 10 for sure, and sometimes number 1 or number 2. So it's something that we're going to continue to follow at NAB. So a question here, and I know we're at time.
We'll take a few questions.
Okay, that's really the bulk. I had a couple other slides here on the pilot radio test bed and all, but I think the auto stuff was really I think the most newsworthy stuff that I could cover tonight. I see a question here about ATSC3, and the answer is yes. In fact, at the Consumer Electronics Show earlier this month, there was an exhibit in the ATSC3 booth about ATSC3 in cars. Hyundai Mobis, which is the part of Hyundai that builds the infotainment systems, have announced that they're going to put ATSC3 into the infotainment system. So it's coming for sure. I mean, in some vehicles, and what the broadcasters do with the chip is, remains to be seen. I believe Sinclair and maybe others have demonstrated, a radio service using ATSC3 where they have dozens of audio programs being delivered to the vehicle using ATSC3. So, that those could be local radio stations. Those could be, new pure play type programs. But that's a technology that's definitely being developed.
Now you made it bad for me because now I have to go out and buy a new car to experience all these things. I rented a car a few weeks ago. It was a Hyundai, and the car made me crazy because there was no volume knob on it, and I was trying to turn down the volume, and it was tap, 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 tap. And
that's right. That's what my experience with my aftermarket radio. I really don't like that.
Yeah, and it also told me I needed to take a break. It showed a picture of a coffee cup. It was telling me a little bit too much. Anyway, we have time for, let's say, one more question. Anyone in the field here have anything to say?
Well, I'm going to just thank you again for inviting me, and encourage you to come up to down to DC and to come to the NAB show. I'm giving a presentation at the NAB show on the high power FM stuff, and I'll include a little more information than I had here today.
Yeah, we got to start thinking about the NAB show in Vegas in April. I've already made my travel plans. I'll be there. I don't know how many of the folks on this call are planning to attend. I will put the exhibit codes on our website so folks can get the free exhibit badges. Hopefully it'll be nice, warm and sunny in Vegas. Okay, there's a question. Any vax boosters required at the show this year? David, do you know anything?
No, as far as I know, I mean, I can tell you, I just went to CES and there were no COVID related requirements of any kind. And I expect the same to be true at NAB. It's the same facility in the same town. I just booked my airfare the other day too, and I was very pleasantly surprised to see that it was under $500, which
me too.
Which was I spent over $800 going to CES, so that was a pleasant surprise.
Yes, but being Vegas, they didn't specify if pants were required.
I'm planning to wear pants.
Oh, well, yeah, me too. So we'll have that going for us. I can't vouch for anyone else at the show. So anyway, let's wrap it up. So David, just send me a copy of the deck so that people can click on it. And I think we probably missed a few items that we just ran out of time for.
Yeah.
So send it to me. I'll post it on the past meetings part of our SBE 15 website. And I'll also take this video from this evening's meeting and I'll edit it and post it like I do with all the others. Be sure to check that out for previous meetings. Next month, we will be at Hofstra University in person for a lighting demo, which will be goo gobs of fun, and also will be on Zoom as well. So we're going to try to do it both ways. Yet again, thanks, David, for being here. Thanks to everybody who joined us, and we'll see you next month, if not before. And everybody be safe and have a good night.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, David. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Please remember to subscribe, to SBE 15, New York City.